Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Side Projects. This one is all about seriously dangerous toys, and if Lawn Dance don't make an appearance, I'm going to be rather disappointed because that shit was wild. You'll shoot your eye out. Though BB guns, slingshots, and throwing stars tend to steal the spotlight when it comes to dangerous toys, they are just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, recent data suggests that nearly 90,000 adults and children end up in hospital every year due to trampoline mishaps alone. Yeah, also because trampolines are mad dangerous. I mean, nowadays they build... I made one for my niece like a few weekends ago. And it's got like this protective cage around the outside and all sorts of padding. When I was a kid, it was just like, here's a trampoline. What's around the edge? Lots of really rusty springs and like a big metal barrier that you're going to smack your head on. Safe. Mid-air collisions and awkward landings can ruin an afternoon of bouncy fun and cause everything from broken teeth and bruises to concussions and even death. Factor in skateboards, lawn darts, and radioactive chemistry sets, and it's a wonder any of us survived childhood at all. So, enough said, let's take a look at 5 seriously dangerous toys. Between the 1950s and 1980s, 6,000 American children ended up in hospital emergency rooms and in a few cases morgues, thanks to a number of unfamily-friendly yard games known collectively as lawn darts. It's the first entry. Of the victims, more than 80% were younger than 15, while half were younger than 10. The 12-inch, 30-centimeter jumbo darts came in multicolored 4-packs and featured plastic stabilizing fins and hardened steel points to ensure maximum penetration when they landed, which unfortunately they sometimes did on family pets and unwitting children. For most of us, these days lawn darts are little more than a quirky reminder of an era long past when consumer safety was generally left up to the consumer themselves. But even then, the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC, partially banned lawn darts multiple times over 3 decades. Originally introduced in the 1950s, lawn darts were originally called jarts, but their design was derived from a weapon used by Romans and Greeks thousands of years before called plumbata, because of course they were. Like them. What shall we make today? Well, let's take an ancient Roman weapon and turn it into a toy. Next up, we'll make the brazen bull for children, which if you don't know what that is, Google is your friend. It's horrible. Like their contemporary recreational counterparts, plumbata were pointy, weighted metal handheld projectiles, but unlike lawn darts, they were held towards opposing troop formations, making them precursors to modern infantry weapons like hand grenades, with the exception that, of course, they don't explode. Though they were capable of killing, plumbata more commonly caused horrific non-fatal wounds that did wonders for demoralizing enemy soldiers and slowing advances. But their origins aside, 20th century marketing gurus obviously didn't see any issues with selling them to kids, or perhaps the profit motive was just more compelling than child safety. When used as instructed, participants stood yards away from a plastic hoop and took turns tossing their darts skyward, hoping that they'd land closer to the target's center than their competitors, thereby giving them more points. The dart's weight-forward design meant that the point almost always hit first and therefore stuck in the ground in the upright position. In October 1970, the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, requested that manufacturer RB Jarts Inc. added additional packaging warnings explicitly noting that their product was for adults only. But though the public clamor became more deafening as injuries and deaths mounted across the US and Canada, nearly 2 decades later, thousands of boxes of lawn darts sat idly on dusty garage shelves and in musty basements waiting to be discovered by bored kids whose parents were occupied elsewhere. In early 1987, a 7-year-old Riverside, California girl named Michelle Snow was killed by a lawn dart thrown by her brother's friend in their backyard. Snow's father became one of the most vocal opponents of lawn darts, advocating for an all-out ban because, as he knew too well, safety warnings were woefully inadequate. Even as the debate raged on, an 11-year-old Tennessee girl had her skull pierced by a lawn dart and fell into a coma. Despite that, it wouldn't be until nearly 2 years later, when on December the 19th, 1988, the CPSC banned the sale of all lawn darts in the United States. The timeless slip and slide was one of those rare toys that was actually safer for kids than it was for grown-ups. But sadly, many adults, especially middle-aged men, couldn't resist its alluring siren song. Yeah, I can absolutely see myself doing this. Despite packaging that always clearly stated that it was only intended for children younger than 10 or 11. Adults being adults, however, many either failed to recognize the warning's importance or simply threw the box away sight unseen. Like this guy. In addition, due to their increased height, weight, and clumsiness, adults were far more likely to experience nasty mishaps that sometimes resulted in serious neck, spine, and head injuries, and even paralysis. Oh my god, I'm slightly afraid of it. In 1999, slip and slide manufacturer Whammo recorded 9 million units after 7 adults suffered similar injuries. 30 feet long and 40 inches wide, slip and slides originally hit the market in 1961, and more than 250,000 units were sold in just a few months, despite being relatively expensive at $9.95 or around $90 today. Little more than plastic sheets meant to be unwound across smooth patches of rockless grass. After the addition of water, slip and slides became particularly slippery, and after a running start, kids could flop on their stomachs and slide dozens of yards. Though the surface had a lubricant infused directly into the plastic, some enterprising youngsters even added dish soap to up the ante. But whereas most kids slid across the surface harmlessly, the legs of adults often shot out from under them without warning long before they could go horizontal willingly, and as a result some wound up in permanent vegetative states or as paraplegics or quadriplegics. Compared to the total number of slip and slides sold, serious injuries were relatively rare, but Whammo was sufficiently concerned with liability issues to take their cash cow off the market in the late 1970s, and it wouldn't resurface until 1982 when the company was purchased by Kransco. Then in 1987, a 34-year-old Wisconsin man using his neighbor's slip and slide broke his neck and became a paraplegic. He sued Kransco and rejected a $250,000 settlement offer from the company's insurer. After the trial in 1991, the man was awarded more than $12 million, and the jury labeled slip and slides defective and unreasonably dangerous. In 1988, a student at the University of Central Florida also broke his neck while using a slip and slide and was awarded nearly $2 million, prompting the company to take the product off the market yet again. But it wasn't until 2 years later that, in conjunction with Kransco, the CPSC issued a recall notice to alert consumers to the slide's dangers. Unlike some product recalls, however, the CPC didn't mandate that it be taken off the market entirely, their reasoning being that it was explicitly meant for children, but almost without exception, it was adults getting hurt. Subsequent investigations by journalists found a number of previous injury cases that were settled before going to trial, with the stipulation that the injured party not discuss what had happened. In 1989, the consumer advocacy group Consumer Affairs Committee of Americans for Democratic Action reported that 5,000 people had gone to hospital for slide-related injuries in 1988 alone, and that during the 80s and 90s, as many as 6 adults had broken their necks or backs, and one 8-year-old girl had suffered brain damage. All told, when used as directed, slip and slides were relatively safe, but like the other hopelessly stigmatized toys on this list, they could never shake their bad rap. Parents love science-related toys because they educate and entertain simultaneously. That said, kids and radioactive elements, no matter how educational, just don't mix. When it was introduced in 1950 by the A.C. Gilbert Company of Erectorset fame, the atomic laboratory kit contains no fewer than 4 distinct types of uranium ore. The brainchild of eccentric tinkerer, entrepreneur, and wacky magician Alfred Carlton Gilbert, the kit was intended to allow kids to create and observe tiny chemical and nuclear reactions right on the living room floor. Though his judgment may have been suspect by today's standards, Gilbert was a popular character who believed that toys were quintessential parts of the childhood experience, and during the First World War it even successfully lobbied the US Council of National Defense not to ban Christmas toy purchases, which made him a bit of an icon. Gilbert also believed that educational toys like his would push the best and brightest children towards careers in science, chemistry, and engineering at a time of burgeoning demand. Gilbert's Atomic Energy Lab is now the most notoriously well-known product of its kind, but it was just one of many on the market during the 1950s. In his autobiography, Gilbert wrote that the government actually encouraged him to develop the set and that it was abundantly safe thanks to the world-class physicists who'd helped develop it, as well as the stamp of approval it had received from Oak Ridge Laboratories, part of the US Atomic Energy Commission. In fact, initial promotional material claims that if used properly, none of the materials were dangerous. However, this and other assertions were based on children and their parents carefully reading and following the instructions and not breaking the seals on the more potent sample jars, which could admittedly raise the radioactive background count. Among other fun activities, the kit urged kids to play hide-and-seek using the included Geiger counter to locate radioactive samples hidden somewhere in their house. This is intense. It may sound ludicrous now, but it wouldn't be until more than 50 years later when a number of investigative science publications included the kit on their lists of the most dangerous toys of all time, which also featured old standbys like slingshots, BB guns, and, you guessed it, lawn darts. Other publications later verified Gilbert's claim that if the directions were followed, the radiation exposure to users wouldn't be any more dangerous than a few hours in direct sunlight. But as we all know, parents don't always supervise their children, and it's probable that at least some of the pint-sized scientists removed container seals and exposed themselves to radiation. In the end, the verdict is still out on whether children were harmed from playing with the kit, but thankfully only about 5,000 units were sold over just 2 years before the product was discontinued. At $49.50, or about $525 in today's money, it wasn't a flop because of real or perceived safety issues, but because it just wasn't that affordable. Arranging tiny colourful beads into cool patterns, dousing them with water and watching them fuse together into a solid mass sounds like good and wholesome fun. Though that may be a dangerous problem, reared its ugly head in 2007 after a number of unwitting children ingested aquadots. Eating beads is never a good thing, but in some cases it can be life-threatening, like when they've been coated in a chemical compound similar to GHB, more commonly known as the date rape drug. Yeah, that's exactly what happened with aquadots, after a number of near-fatal ingestion accidents led to the CPSC issuing a 4 million unit recall. But for some parents, like Arizona residents Mark and Beth Monge, whose 18-month-old son Ryan swallowed a number of aquadots in July of 2007, their worst nightmares became a reality. Young Ryan began vomiting nearly immediately, and the situation became so dire that responding paramedics called for an airlift to a local medical center. While there, Ryan stopped building, had multiple seizures, and ultimately fell into a coma. Thankfully, he lived, but both medical and court records show that it suffered severe and permanent injuries, including brain damage. Shortly thereafter, 2 more toddlers suffered similar fates, after which Aquadots manufacturer Spin Master Inc. and its Canadian affiliate Spin Master LLC pulled the products from store shelves. Retailing for less than $30 and available at both traditional and online retailers across the US and Canada, Aquadots were intended for children older than 4. The packaging did warn of ingestion hazards, but didn't make any mention of toxic chemicals like the one responsible for the children's comas. Nearly a decade after the Ryan Monge incident, his family finally got their day in court after filing a federal lawsuit against both the manufacturer and the retailer where they bought the Aquadots, Toys R Us Inc. The fact that the case ever went to trial makes it a rarity because most similar lawsuits are either dismissed or settled out of court before courtroom proceedings begin. However, in this case, what followed was a classic example of corporate finger-pointing, as the manufacturers, distributors, and retailers all sought to deflect blame and liability away from themselves. Allegations were made that one foreign distributor and the Chinese manufacturer opted to swap the originally specified chemical coating for one that cost nearly $7,000 less per ton, even though they knew it would be exponentially more dangerous. Not surprisingly, Spin Master categorically denied the allegations that it knew about this, let alone approved the decision. Instead, the company argued that the blame lay squarely with the Chinese manufacturing firm who'd been contracted to produce the product, over which it claimed it had no direct control since it was a distinct business entity. In 2015, after just a few hours of deliberation, a federal jury sided with the Monges after more than a full day of closing arguments. They were awarded $400,000 plus another $85,000 for Ryan's medical bills. Mark and Beth Monge said they'd appeal for more damages, largely because they claimed Ryan's injuries were far more severe than came to light during the trial. When it was introduced in 1963, Kenner's Easy Bake Oven was a revolutionary toy that became an overnight sensation with kids across the country. Featuring 2 standard 100-watt light bulbs as heat sources, nearly 500,000 units were sold in the first year of production alone. By the mid-90s, thanks largely to marketing efforts by new owner Hasbro, sales numbers had topped 15 million units, and the oven sold briskly in overseas markets like Japan as well. Easy Bake Ovens came in multiple colors and included tiny cake mix packets and round pans. Once mixed with water and added to the pans, they were pushed through a narrow slot in front of the oven to the cooking area. Between 15 and 20 minutes later, the perfectly baked cakes were ejected through a similar slot in the opposite end. Admittedly, no child was ever killed or exposed to cancer-causing radiation while making blueberry muffins in an Easy Bake Oven, but over the years there were a number of instances in which children got one of their hands stuck inside the slot and received nasty nasty burns. In one 2007 incident, a little girl's hand was burned so severely that she had to have a number of fingers amputated. Official documents show that in 2007 alone, the company received nearly 250 individual reports, and urged by the CSPC, Hasbro recalled nearly 1 million Easy Bake Ovens. Keen to put the bad PR behind them once and for all, the company also issued a do-it-yourself repair kit to make the ovens safer, but families also had the option of returning their oven to the retailer where they'd purchased it in exchange for a product voucher they could use towards less dangerous toys. Though the recall, repair kits, and voucher schemes did reduce the number of incidents, they didn't eliminate them altogether. By that time, many assumed that the Easy Bake Oven's time had come and gone, but official Hasbro press releases stated that after 5 decades in production, they weren't about to throw in the towel on what had become a real classic and a real moneymaker. Ironically, in 2003, just a few years before the massive recall, Hasbro's Easy Bake Ovens won the coveted Toy of the Year award from Parenting magazine. The original style ovens have been officially banned since 2017, but even now, other smaller and less dangerous versions are available. And gone are the days of boring old cake mixes and traditionally girly colors, because now they come with a number of new packets, including banana bread, traditional brownies, red velvet cake, and even pizza, and are available in more gender-neutral colors that appeal to both boys and girls. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.